Hey guys, what's up and welcome to my Back for Blood deck builder guide. This is mostly for Nightmare and No Hope, so if you're newer or you've been having trouble passing some of the missions on the higher difficulties, then you've come to the right place. So in this video, I'm going to try to summarize a starting point for each of the main roles that you can play as in Back for Blood. There's really only a few types of decks that you can make. There's DPS roles, so if you want to do a lot of damage, you can build your decks for specific weapons, that kind of thing. But there's also decks like healer decks and melee decks, or even just kind of weird support decks. Alright guys, so before we start, if you are brand new to Back for Blood, if you've only been playing for a few weeks or even a month or two, I would really suggest that you follow all the way through this video because there are a lot of things that aren't obvious and a lot of things that the game just flat out lies to you about. And I'm going to explain a few of those things and why I picked certain cards as we go through, but if you kind of have an idea of what's going on already, then feel free to just skip through the chapters. Each one I will show the full kind of base build, as I'll explain as we go through. Some of the cards are like substitutable, so if you see an ammo card, that doesn't mean you have to use that ammo card, or like a health card, you can change those out. But yeah, feel free to skip around. At the end of the video, I'm going to go through and show a bunch of different team builds and some other really interesting decks that I've come up with. So jumping right into it, here is a DPS starter deck. And you can see there's only 12 cards instead of 15 here. That's because I'm leaving some slots open. And as we go through these decks, a common theme is you're not going to be using these exact cards 100% of the time. But the idea is that some of these cards are representative of the types of cards that you should be starting with. So for example, the first card in the DPS starting deck is Hyper Focused, and this one gives you extra weak spot damage. So a lot of people don't like to lose the move speed while shooting, so if you find that annoying, you can use a different one of the weak spot cards, such as Ridden Slayer, Reckless Strategy, or Killer's Instinct. Having extra weak spot damage is super important if you want to take down mutations quickly. Rather than just doing extra base damage, weak spot damage is basically doubling your damage output. Next up we have Shredder. Each bullet hit causes the target to take 1% increased damage for 3 seconds. So obviously if you're using something like a sniper, you're not going to run Shredder in the deck, because it's going to do basically nothing. But if you're running basically any weapon besides a sniper rifle, anything that has a high rate of fire like a shotgun or an LMG, Shredder's going to allow the whole team to do up to 15% extra damage to that target. Then we have Glass Cannon. 25% extra damage at the expense of 30% of your base health. So if you're just playing on Nightmare, you might not want to lose 30% of your health. You can honestly get away with not using Glass Cannon on Nightmare. But this card is super awesome because it's one of the few cards that gives you an extremely high amount of extra damage. When you're playing on No Hope, having a lot of extra damage is super critical because the mutations will have an insane amount of health. Next up we have On Your Mark. This card is super overlooked and it's an incredibly good team card, especially on No Hope. On Nightmare you might be able to get away without it, but this one's going to give your team extra ammo, move speed while firing, reload speed, and swap speed every time a horde is triggered. And then we have another ammo card, which this one can be substituted for any one of the 3 or 4 extra ammo cards. So you could instead use Stock Pouch, Mag Carrier, I would not use Ammo Pouch, but Ammo Belt, Ammo Mule, Tactical Vest, or a Shell Carrier. Next up is Large Caliber Rounds, and this one is another one that's going to depend on the type of build that you're using. Again, if you're using like a sniper, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of value out of this card. But in most situations, being able to shoot through the Ridden and hit the ones behind it is super useful. It's going to help you out a lot when you're trying to clear the hordes. Then in the bottom left we have Ammo for All, which is going to stack. So for every person that runs this card, just like On Your Mark, the effects will stack. So instead of Ammo for All giving you only 10% extra ammo capacity, if 2 people or even 3 people run it, you're going to get 20 or 30% extra ammo capacity. And if 3 people run it, you're going to get 10.5 extra team damage. And keep in mind, these cards that say damage work differently from the cards that say bullet damage. When a card says bullet damage, it only applies to the bullets, but when a card says damage, that means all types of damage. So explosive damage, fire damage, anything that's not a bullet. Next up we have Patient Hunter, which is my favorite DPS card, hands down. This card gives you 30% extra bullet damage if you aim down sights for about 2.25 seconds. Then we have Marked for Death. Mutations you ping are highlighted and your team deals 10% increased damage to highlighted enemies. So just keep in mind the reason this card is so good is because it increases everyone else's damage to the mutation that's being highlighted. Next up we have Confident Killer. When your team kills a mutation, you get 1% extra damage up to 15% until the end of the level. Now you guys are going to be killing a lot of mutations, so you'll very quickly get up to that extra 15% damage. Then we have Well Fed. This is another team card that can stack up to 40 team health. If you guys aren't running as a whole team, it's probably better to run one of these 3 cards here. But if you have a full team of 4 people, running Well Fed is really good. And finally we have Admin Reload, and this is really going to depend on if you're running a secondary weapon or not. This card's definitely not required either, but it's a pretty good starting place. Alright, next up we're going to be going over a good healer deck. Obviously if you're healing your teammates, you're going to want as much healing efficiency as possible. Medical Expert takes the first spot here, and it also grants the team extra healing efficiency. The way healing efficiency is supposed to work is that the doc is the only one that's supposed to need it. But in reality, the game is pretty buggy, so the way it actually works is that it does depend on the target being healed, what their healing efficiency is. So if you're playing Doc and you go to heal, say, a walker that has 0 healing efficiency, you're actually going to heal them a lot less than, say, if they had an extra 30% healing efficiency. So if all 4 people on your team can run Medical Expert, I would really suggest doing it. It's one of the best cards in the game. Next up we have Antibiotic Ointment, plus 25% healing efficiency, and whenever you heal somebody, the target's going to get 20 temporary health. Then EMT Bag, an extra 50% healing efficiency. Next we have Field Surgeon, which is going to heal 3 trauma to the target whenever you use meds on them. This is one of the only ways that you're going to actually be able to heal trauma off of people, so I would really suggest using this card. Then we have Needs of the Many. Now this card actually falls into the support category as well as Medical Expert, but since you're playing a Doc build, you don't really need damage. So giving your team an extra life is way more important than anything else at this point. Next up we have Medical Professional, which gives an additional 10 trauma damage and 1 extra life to a player if you use a defib or a first aid on them. So if somebody goes down, you revive them and then hit them with a first aid, that will give them their life back. Or if they fully die, you can use the defib on them to bring them back to life with their extra life remaining. Next up we have Support Scavenger. This one is going to highlight nearby support accessories on your HUD so that you can see them easier, and it's going to make more of them spawn in. Next up, this is an optional card, but it's amped up, and this one is going to give your team 20 health back whenever a horde is triggered. Then we have Experienced EMT. When you use a medical accessory, the target gains 10% maximum health, stamina, and stamina regen until the end of the level. The most important part of this card is the 10% maximum health. If you and your team decide that you want to have an insane amount of health, just run Canned Goods and Well Fed, and then use Experienced EMT on somebody. Next we have Well Rested and Fit as a Fiddle. These 2 cards need each other to work. Well Rested basically allows you to get more health if you have trauma taken, and Fit as a Fiddle gives you more extra temporary health capacity. Basically the idea with these 2 cards is you're giving yourself extra healing capacity. This just makes it to where your insane amount of healing doesn't go to waste. And then finally we have Shoulder Bag, which is going to allow you to hold more support items. So here's the starting deck for Melee. These are the most important cards that you can probably run. There's a couple of them that you can swap out for others, but basically if you ran just these cards as a Melee player, you'd have no problems. So first up we've got Slugger and Brazen. These will give you extra melee stamina efficiency and attack speed. You combine that with Meth Head, which also does the same thing. You're going to be able to infinitely swing your melee weapon. It was never intended for you to have infinite stamina efficiency, but you know, the devs did what they did and the bug still exists now, so you might as well use it. Then we have EMT Bag. So if you look ahead, you'll see cards like Vanguard, Face Your Fears, and Battle Lust, which will all heal you and your teammates. So having the extra healing efficiency not only helps you, but also your team. Vanguard is the most important card for a melee, and if you run Fit as a Fiddle and Well Rested, you're going to get that overheal capability. Next we have Down in Front. While crouching, you neither take nor deal friendly fire damage. So that means if you're crouched, you won't hurt your teammates and they can't hurt you. I see a lot of melee players ignore this card and then go around hitting their teammates. That's super annoying. Just put down in front on your deck so that way you can get the commons off of your teammates without having to worry about killing them yourself. Then we have Spiky Bits. This one is going to give you extra melee damage, and it's going to give you 20% damage resistance while you're using the melee weapon. Then Mean Drunk. This one is kind of optional, but it's really helpful because it's going to give you more melee damage and allow you to attack in a much larger area. Next up is Heavy Hitter. This one is super good because if a crusher walks up to you and they're about to grab you, you can just slap them with your melee weapon and it will stumble them instantly. Then we have Scar Tissue, another kind of optional card. You could put Motorcycle Helmet into or whatever, but this card is super good because it gives you acid resistance and you're going to take 1 less damage from all ridden. Then Battle Lust, which we already talked about, it's going to heal you for 1 health and 0.125 trauma every time you get a kill. But if you're running EMT Bag and your whole team is running Medical Expert, you're going to actually heal for like 2.5 or 3 health and it'll heal a lot more trauma than that. Same thing with Face Your Fears. You're going to get way more temporary health than just 1. The important thing to note about Face Your Fears is don't put on any of the melee attachments that increase your attack range, because then you'll be able to kill them from say 3.5 meters away, and this card won't activate because you have to be within 2.5 meters of them. So finally, this last category is for the sort of honorable mention cards or just any good team cards. So there's only 12 slots, 12 cards in these starter decks that I've shown you so far. So if you're looking to fill in the extra 3 slots, this is where you should look. For example, if you are trying to fill up the rest of your slots on a DPS deck, you might choose something like Wide Mouth Magwell, which gives you extra reload speed. It doesn't have to be this card. There's other reload cards, so you can pick what you like out of those, but basically running extra reload speed is really good, and it's something that I think any DPS should throw into one of those extra slots. Then we have Run Like Hell, a little bit of move speed and sprint speed. This card's really good for any type of build, maybe except for melee. Helps you get around a lot faster and evade things when you need to. I know we've mentioned Medical Expert about 6 times already, but it's so good that I have to put it in here again just to show you to use it. Same with On Your Mark. I'd really recommend at least 3 people run Medical Expert and at least 2 people run On Your Mark. Then we have Mad Dash. This one kind of complements Run Like Hell, and there are a few other cards you can run like Stamina and Sprint Efficiency cards, just like Superior Cardio. But probably Run Like Hell and Mad Dash are the 2 best movement cards. Then we have Inspiring Sacrifice, which is going to give you temp health when somebody goes down, as well as giving you 20 health over 10 seconds. Then again, we have Needs of the Many. Getting extra team lives is one of the best things you can do, so at least 2 people should run this card. Ammo for All, it's only really worth it if 3 people run it, so if you're just going into quick play, I would probably swap it out for one of the weapon-specific cards, like Tactical Vest that I've got here on the bottom right. This one, as we mentioned earlier, can be used as a placeholder for any of the weapon-specific cards like Shell Carrier, Stock Pouch, etc. But going back a little bit, we've got Down in Front. This one's good for everybody on the team to have because you won't kill each other. We have Amped Up, which is going to give you 20 health every time a horde is triggered. And finally, we have Hazmat Specialist, which is a weird card, but it's one of my favorites in the game, and I'll explain why. Bait jars are super useful against mutations because they will instantly stumble them. They're also really good against bosses like ogres. So if you just have 1 person running bait jars and 2 people running Hazmat Specialist, every time they hit something with a bait jar, it's probably going to stumble it, and then you're going to get a bait jar or 2 back when you kill that mutation. I've got a second page, and we already talked about this, but having a personal health card like Hydration Pack, Vitamins, or Canned Goods is really good. You can use any of those 3. And then a very unpopular pick, but Wooden Armor, because trauma resistance is actually really good, especially if your team doesn't have a devoted healer. So you don't have to use Wooden Armor, you could use Durable or one of the other ones. But yeah, having trauma resistance is really good. And then we've got Well Fed again. I know this is another super unpopular one, but if you've got a full team and you're coordinated, Well Fed is probably one of the best cards that you can have on your deck. Same with Well Rested and Fit as a Fiddle. You don't need necessarily even 3 or 4 of these cards on your deck, but having at least 2 of each is super good. Then we've got Out with a Bang, which is going to drop a pipe bomb every time somebody dies. To be honest, I wouldn't run this card very often unless you don't know the people that you're playing with, or if you just go down a lot. Then we have Empowered Assault, which is one of the better cards that they added recently to the game. And what Empowered Assault does is every time you kill a mutation, the next time you damage a mutation, it's going to instantly stumble them. It also provides a little bit of team stumble damage. So my recommendation is that this card really isn't needed on most decks, and I know a lot of people just think it's the best thing in the world, but honestly, if you're running a sniper class and you're using a Barrett, or if you're using attack 14 on a shotgun build, you should be able to stumble the mutations pretty quickly anyway. So if you're running something like an LMG, this one can be really good. Then we have some extra inventory cards, so surplus pouches. This one is going to give you 5% less health, but it's going to let everybody on your team have an extra offensive slot. Boxo bags is going to reduce your health by 10%, so that's pretty heavy, but it's going to allow your whole team to carry an extra support item. And then we've got a couple of copper cards. Lucky Pennies, this one you could use Money Grubbers instead. I know that people debate about which ones are better to use, but honestly, I would just run Lucky Pennies and then Copper Scavenger to give you some more economy. You don't really need to run 5 or 10 copper cards like some people do. 2 is really enough. And then finally, Safe Room Recovery. This is another good option to heal your team. It's going to let your team recover 15 health, 7 trauma damage, and give you some more ammo each time you go to the start of a new level. Keep in mind, this is a team card, so if you don't have a coordinated team, probably running Fresh Bandage is going to be better. Alright, now that we've got a good place to start for all of these, here's some examples that I've made. And this is for a team that consists of a shotgun DPS, sniper DPS, a healer, and a melee player. I'm not going to go through all of the cards, I'll let you read them for yourself, and then you can go back and figure out what they do if you don't already know. But rather what I'd like to do at this point is just talk about the cleaners. So this is, in my opinion, probably one of the best team comps that you can run. So I've got Tala and Mom, as well as Doc and Charisse. So let's start with the easiest one. Let's go with Doc. So why would you run Doc on a healer? Well, she's got extra healing efficiency, gives the team trauma resistance, and she can heal people for free. I really don't think there's a substitute for Doc if you're running a healer deck. Mom can be okay-ish, but there's really no substitute. So the only time I would ever run a Mom instead of a Doc is if your team goes down a lot, or if you're running Pumped Up to prevent team temporary health decay, and you wanted to max that. But honestly, I don't think replacing Doc is a good idea, ever. So then for melee, I pick Charisse most of the time. I know Hang is really good too, especially if you're running Food Scavenger. But honestly, I think Charisse just makes more sense because she gives extra bolstered health to the team. So every time she gets a kill, you're going to have even more temporary health, overheal stuff going on. And then she also has innate trauma resistance. And the ability to make armor pieces is really, really awesome because it's going to prevent you from an instant death if you get hit by a tall boy. The one downside to running Charisse is if you get Cost of Avarice, the supply crates are going to have less copper and more armor plates. Honestly, I still think Charisse is better than Hang. Then finally, let's go back to the DPS cleaners. So Tala obviously is really good because she has bleed damage. She can spawn in a whistle on the map and a warp chest. You could also use Walker, he's a pretty good pick, or you could use Jim. But personally, I just don't really like Jim a whole lot. I don't think he does a whole lot for the team. It really depends on if you need Mom's abilities or not, I guess. Or if you think that the team temp health decay is worth it. Just looking quickly at these decks, both the DPS decks are pretty much built off of the starter decks that I showed you earlier. There are a few substitutions, so for example, the shotgun build has Hunker Down, Quick Kill, Scattergun skills. You know, those are very shotgun specific cards. And so that's okay to do that because we already talked about getting rid of some cards because they won't work for you. For example, it doesn't have Patient Hunter because you're not going to aim down sights for that long with a shotgun. But just going through all of the team cards real quick, you know, you've got Ammo for All on 3 of the players. You've got Well Fed on all 4. You've got 3 Well Resteds, and you've got 2 Fit as a Fiddles. And then you've got Charisse, which also gives another. So all in all, you've basically got 3 of each of the Well Rested and Fit as a Fiddle cards. Then you've got 3 Medical Experts, 2 people running Lucky Pennies, 2 people running Copper Scavenger, and then you've at the very minimum got 1 extra Needs of the Mini and Support Scavenger, although like I said, I would recommend having 2 Needs of the Minis on. But overall, this is a really good starting place, so I'm not saying these are perfect by any means, but if you had a full team and you all used these decks with these cleaners, I promise you they would be super good. And finally, here are a few other builds that I really enjoy a lot. I've got a whole video on this LMJesus deck, but I've changed it up slightly. Basically, this thing just melts everything. I would also recommend putting the card Belligerent in here if you can, to just do crazy damage. But you've got Suppressing Fire, which slows down commons, Fill 'em Full of Lead, which gives you extra firing speed and damage. Obviously, Pumped Up and Medical Expert are going to depend on your team, but the rest are all basically damage and ammo. This deck is super fun, you just melt everything really quickly. Then we have a very standard unlimited ammo Belgian build. This one is basically centered around running a lot of team cards, and you're going to use your Belgian pretty much the whole time. And then this is that really super fun deck that, you know, people are going to look at this and just think how strange it is, because it's not a meta deck at all. But it is super fun, and I promise you'll have a good time with it. The idea is you're going to use a bow and find one of the melee attachments that gives you health on a kill. That way you can just focus on killing the commons. And then you're going to run around using bile jars or Molotovs that you get from Highwaymen, and you're going to use that to heal yourself because you've got Fire in the Hole and Pyro. So regardless if you're throwing a Molotov or a bait jar, you're going to get your health back. It's also got a lot of trauma resistance and a lot of health. So this one, I would probably just run this if I was playing solo. It's just a fun deck. And then finally, you've got an Act 4, or really any act, but a no ADS build. It's not weapon specific, but it's got a crap ton of weak spot damage and some reload speed, as well as just straight up damage and accuracy. Basically, at this point, guys, I think you have everything that you need to start building decks. Those are pretty much all of the really basic decks that you're ever going to need in this game. So there are a lot more types of builds you can make, but as far as the best ones go, I think I've covered all of those. So good luck and have fun. I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.